Hey everybody, welcome to the Geek Reloading podcast. I'm your host Adam, and as always, my co-host Josh.
Hello.
And we have another retro roundup for
Pocket
you.
edition.
The Pocket Edition, the first of possibly many.
I felt like I was very incredibly awesome to come up with that in my brain.
Pocket Edition.
The Pocket Edition.
So, in this one, we're going to be talking specifically about the Game Boy models, not the Game Boy Advance. We're going to hone in on just the Game Boy and its future iterations that came on after. And this one, I mean, dude, I think that this is like prime our childhood, like kind of in a nutshell. What do you think, man?
Oh yeah. It's way back in the day. It's crazy to me. Like, it's just kind of something that was always around, and we just anyways. So
no.
I got this story I gotta tell, like way back in the day, back in the day. I was hanging out with this family that I was pretty much one of their children of growing up. She was my babysitter and everything, but it was early on, and I was all into Nintendo. I was in it to win it, but one of the brothers of this family, he was working on he was in a play in his high school. He was a bit older than us, or maybe it was junior high, either way. But he was in a play, and I was like, I've never heard him acting before. I've never heard about him acting. I was like, why are you in this play? And he's like, I get to play Game Boy. And I was like, what is Game Boy? Like, what? And he's like, it's a handheld Nintendo. And I was young at this time, and it blew my mind. Like, it blew my mind that there was a handheld game system.
Yeah, and this wasn't even necessarily completely out there. There were other game systems that were handhelds at the time. It wasn't the first one, but this one just seemed to... it was Nintendo, so Nintendo did it right and everything, and it's still interesting that it just became its own icon, just over time.
There were handheld video games at the time, but wasn't this the first one that like had cartridges and different games that you could play and all that?
I think that the Atari Lynx was at the same time.
Okay.
And the Atari Lynx, I think, was also... I know that it is cartridge-based and everything.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you're right. But those were like $1.5 million. Like...
Yes.
If I remember correctly. They were like so expensive, it was stupid. The Game Boy was...
pretty close. It was just $1.25 million, not $1.5 million.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. I was close.
Yeah, it came out, I think, the same year, it looks like. 1989, the Atari Lynx came out at the same time as Game Boy. So it's right there. It was like a few months after Game Boy was the Lynx. There might have been another one, but I can't remember.
Either way, like, it was just the coolest thing to play these games that I'd been playing on Nintendo on a freaking... I mean, granted, the screen was left a lot to be desired, but,
You know what, though? But in that day and age, it wasn't. It was pretty smooth for what it was. And if you actually... The actual measurement is like 2.5 inches like across, which is tiny compared to our gigantic smartphones now.
That's true.
It was only 4 tones of gray on that weird yellow-ass screen, or yellowish green. Come on,
be real. It wasn't gray. It was green. Like, it was just green. Like, they were all different colors of green.
Yeah, but I mean, for its time, it was pretty impressive. So I mean, what we do with the retro roundup, we put some interesting facts up there, we talk about them and everything, and we just kind of reminisce to an extent also, because I mean, when it comes to retro, everybody's got stories. That's what matters, right?
Exactly. And as you should, like, and if you don't have them, start making them now. Start making those memories. But go ahead.
Yeah, like, what I wonder is if I feel like most people our age had the same kinds of experiences with Game Boy. I feel like everybody kind of had like I swear, maybe it's because I grew up a little ghetto, but I feel like most people are like, my friend had a Game Boy. I didn't have a Game Boy until much later. Or my friend had this and then I got it a year later. I feel like that's kind of like a common theme.
Well,
but then also,
it definitely was
I don't know.
the rich kid in the neighborhood had this Game Boy, and everyone wanted to be his friend because of it. And then they, whether it was okay, this is the only thing I've been asking for my birthday, Christmas, and anything else for a year, and I finally get it, or they dropped in price. I can't remember, but
I'm pretty sure that most people got it when the Game Boy Pocket released because it was cheaper. It came out many years later, and it was when Game Boy was kind of in full swing.
You know what? The thing is, I never had a Game Boy Pocket.
Yes, you
Never.
did. Yes, you did.
Oh, okay. Years and years after the Game Boy Pocket.
Years after, we had almost a falling out over my old red Game Boy Pocket. But we're going to get there. We got to go back.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Back in the day.
Yeah, so first off, some interesting facts about the Game Boy. The Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Pocket, and the Game Boy Light all accumulated with having over 118 million units sold worldwide.
And this is way back in the day, so those are huge numbers.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not like
impressive.
Crazy like the Switch is now, but that back in the day, that was crazy.
When you think about back in the day, we're going to keep on using that. These should be called Retro Roundup Back in the Day editions. But no. In the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, gaming was still kind of a fringe thing. It wasn't nearly as prevalent as now, and it wasn't nearly as everywhere. But Game Boy had a way of making it kind of everywhere. I think it's because it was cheaper than a Nintendo. It had the transportability, but also in that day, back in the day, it had, you had all of these, like the first one took 4 batteries.
Yep,
and that's expensive. That's not rechargeable batteries. That's the early 90s. You're chunking out for batteries all the time. That's ridiculous. And it was only like 30 hours of playtime before those batteries were dead.
Oh yeah, and they were like, and I loved when if you ever played your original Game Boy to the point of your batteries dying, it just like darkened the screen, like everything became darker and darker, and then all of a sudden it just like stopped. And then kind of like that darkness faded to the empty screen. Oh, that was crazy.
It was rough, man. It was rough. So
it was.
The game that was purchased the most and had the most units moved was Tetris. But Tetris also was bundled with the original Game Boy, so it's kind of a cop-out.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Wii Fit, or not the Wii Fit, the
Wii Sports.
Wii Sports. Yeah, it was the highest selling game. Yeah, it's because it was not ever sold. It
came bundled. And so even though Tetris is an awesome game, I wouldn't consider it the highest sold game. And so if you're going to the actual highest sold game, that would be Pokemon Red and Green in Japan, or Blue. So Red and Blue in America, or Red and Green in Japan, with 31,380,000 units sold.
I'll say this, Tetris was amazing. It was the first time that you're like a brain workout was like really there. Man, Tetris. I still know that sound, the songs and everything from Tetris so well because of the Game Boy.
Yeah, and actually the first, I played Tetris originally on Nintendo, but they had a whole Tetris adventure game on Game Boy. I can't remember specifically what it's called, but it was one where you were a safari adventure explorer or something like that, and it had all these different levels that had different effects. You had Indiana Jones style spikes and stuff that were coming out of the ceiling of the game while you were playing, and you had to work around different blocks and stuff, and it was pretty interesting to play. And that was another Game Boy game.
Seriously, honestly, my big thing is I didn't know Tetris was on the Nintendo. My first connection with Tetris was on Game Boy, and it's I kind of wonder if I had found games like that, if I could have gotten my parents into it. No, this is to train your brain to recognize patterns and everything. If I was, a brilliant genius, as a fucking 7-year-old.
So, one thing that's really interesting about the Pokemon ones is that the second highest grossing game came out 7 years after the actual system came out. And then the third highest, which was Pokemon Gold and Silver, came out 10 years after the game system had launched. And just for the 90s, that's kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy and unheard of.
It is. But I mean, you know, gaming was weird back in the 90s. Like in the 80s and 90s, gaming was weird. Like you were kind of weird if you gamed. And like and that's how a lot of us kind of came together, because we were all kind of weird pariahs in a way. But man, the Game Boy is just there's so many memories of this thing, and you know, everyone had these different attachments and everything, and it was just
oh yeah, we'll get to those because there are some bonkers ones that are really fun. But first off, so Game Boy, you know, that was released in 1989, and then they actually came out with a colorful version where it had different colored cases, which was the
Play It Loud versions.
Yes, and that came out in 1995, but it was only a year before the Game Boy Pocket series, which was my actual first owned Game Boy game, was in 1996. That's when they were released.
Yeah, and for me, I had a Game Boy early on, but my second Game Boy was a Game Boy Color. It was purple. Wow. It was see-through purple.
It was the atomic purple.
Yeah. And it was terrible, and I hated the color, but I still loved that thing so much because the screen was sharper. That's what I love more than anything else, is like the pixels were super clear.
And also, Atomic Purple was bitchin'. I'm making a call out to all video game, console, or whatever creators. Please bring back the crazy, translucent, colorful systems, like the ones that were for the 64, where you had the green and the watermelon and all those. Like, I mean, seriously, I am a bitch for that shit. I love it. Like, I have a see-through blue controller on my PS2, a see-through blue and green one on my Xbox, and I've got a see-through crystal one on my PS4. Like, if you make one of those, I'm gonna buy it. Hands down.
Yes, he will.
Yeah. Anyway, so the Game Boy Pocket was like a big shift because they've made adjustments on making it so then it was no longer 4 AA batteries, it was 2 AAA batteries. It was also just smaller, and it made it so then it really actually was that the entire pitch was Game Boy Pocket. It fits in your pocket, but you didn't lose any screen size. It was the first time that it didn't feel like you had to have like a carrying case for a Game Boy.
The screen actually got a little bit bigger, so yeah, it was. Yeah, and it cleaned up, because like the first Game Boy was kind of like the first draft of it with what they had, like way back in the day. The Game Boy Pocket is really when they go, okay, this can be something refined and fixed. Like, they made it better by far. Like, they fixed a lot of those problems that everyone was having with the Game Boy.
Yeah, this was my introduction to it. I think I was 11 at the time, and like, this thing was the go-to gift for probably everybody's birthday and Christmas for that year and the year after, because I think it was also in between 2 console releases. So,
well, and I think because they kept the same original price for the Game Boy, for the Game Boy Pocket, and so it was like super cheap at that time. It was like really cheap, because I think at that point they realized they could make a lot of money off of just the games rather than the systems, and they just want to make sure everyone has the system so they can buy the games.
Yeah, the original price for a Game Boy Pocket was $69.99. Man,
can you imagine?
Yeah, like, I mean, I think that's why I finally got one. My single, my mom being a single full-time working mother, she was finally like, I can flip that. Let's do that. And yeah, I finally got it. Like that, it was a good Christmas, guys. It was an awesome Christmas.
Yeah. And it is. It's funny because I remember like the Game Boy being the first reason why I was like, why does my neck hurt so bad?
Oh yeah, like, you're hunched over. You got that Mr. Burns back.
Yep, exactly. And you start going, oh, I just feel bad. And you don't even connect it because you don't think about that when you're playing your Game Boy.
Damn straight, man. Anyway, so
real quick, we got to add add in, like there's those times when you're driving in a car or something and you're literally playing by the light of like the passing, like
Oh yeah, like the light posts and stuff. Yeah.
Yes. And it's like, oh man, some of those games were ridiculous that way, trying to play like that.
You had to have the book rule. If you can't read a book, you can't play your Game Boy. Like that was the same kind of thing at the time. It was something that also they did try and correct in 1998. They came out with a Game Boy Light, which literally was only in Japan, and it just made it so it had an illuminated background. That was their first foray into making adjustments to the screen. When they did the Game Boy Pocket, they got rid of the yellowish screen and they went to a gray background. So then it was supposed to save on the battery life. But the Game Boy Light actually gave an illumination, which made it easier. Now, granted, the illumination was next to nothing. It was rough. But they did try.
But it was something. It was enough that it worked. Like you could play it in the dark.
Yeah, it was definitely something that they were noticing the gaps in their originals, and they were trying to completely continue to improve upon. What's really cool about the Game Boy Pocket and the original Game Boy is that there is a huge group of retro console modders who will actually put a backlit LED and a lithium-ion battery into the classic original hardware, and they'll make it so then you can use it, but also you don't have to shell out a bunch for a bunch of batteries, and also they'll give you a better screen. And even some of them go to the extent that they'll actually mod in a whole Raspberry Pi system into one of those little cases and make it so that it's like, hey, you have your Game Boy Pocket, whatever, but also here's all the games. And so it's cool that they have their own little like niche grouping within the gamer community that like to kind of retrofit and mod these old systems.
Yeah, and it was well done. Like a lot of people just care about these things, like even decades away from it, like they still care about these systems.
Yeah. So fun fact about the Game Boy, Josh, the Game Boy actually had more computing power than the original NES.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it had a faster chip, I believe, like a faster processor, and it had a little bit more memory to actually run. So it was technically more powerful than the NES, although the NES was still able to do 8-bit color.
Well, I think it's because the screen, if nothing else, just because of the screen, because the little LED screens, because I mean, you got to think, the other handheld video games were the LCD panels, and it was just like there was only so many things like in each place. This used the same technology as that, but instead of creating little figures, they created pixels. Yeah. So it was that way. Yeah. So, oh man, that's back in the day.
Yeah. So then after the Game Boy Light came out in Japan, they finally released the final and probably, I would argue, say the coolest iteration, which Josh already mentioned, the Game Boy Color.
Man, that was such a step up from what I originally knew, because I didn't get your Game Boy Pocket till later. Like that was my second system, or Game Boy system, and man, it was so sharp. It was so just everything, and there was color. It was the craziest thing ever. Yeah.
One thing is that the Game Boy Color, it had games when it was released. Some games were specifically designed for Game Boy Color use and after, and it had a much more robust color palette. But even older games were able to sometimes actually be updated or upgraded to a color style. One of them was like Pokemon. Pokemon, you'd have some colors come through, but some colors were still just the grayscale. And so it was a little bit 50-50.
Well, with that, what they did is they took a certain variant of color, like a certain variant of the pixels that they had, because like you said, there was like 4 different shades of green on the original Game Boy. They took one or two of those. I can't remember which one. I think they took 2 and then did like a light and a dark still. And then the middle 2, they would kind of shift into different colors. Yes. I remember playing, you could play this a lot more on the Super Game Boy, Like you could play with it and you could see which styles they did, and they literally just took one of those color palettes and put it into the Game Boy Color.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Game Boy Color was super popular because it was actually also shown a lot in television and movies. Like the original Game Boy made it very, very clear that, you know, it was like a kind of a pop culture reference as well when it first was released. But the Game Boy Pocket and the Game Boy Light kind of got overlooked a little bit. But the Game Boy Color was kind of around that time where product placement, so to speak, within TV and movies was starting to be experimented with more. And so it was kind of like for my generation and your generation, kind of the one of the ones that was most recognizable.
Yeah, and it started becoming more of a mainstream thing rather than a weird guy sitting in the back corner.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. And this one was really cool because obviously it came in 6 different colors like the Game Boy Pocket did, but it came in that awesome, sexy atomic purple. But also, this was when you started seeing the special edition variants that were showing up. You had a yellow and silver Pokemon special editions, and even someone like Tommy Hilfiger had a special edition.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but I mean, that's crazy.
I remember the Pokemon one. The Pokemon one is one that's actually sought after by local collectors. It's not hyper rare, but it's rare enough that when one pops up, if you're a retro gamer, it usually gets picked up pretty quickly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, it just had like a decal on it, right?
It had a decal. It was also yellow. It was a little bit different yellow, and I think it had like an actual like not painted, but like printed on piece of for Pikachu specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah, one cool thing is that this was the last one that was officially at 8-bit graphics. I mean, this was the last one before the Game Boy Advance was released, which we'll do a whole nother episode on the Game Boy Advance. But yeah, this one was really cool, and I feel like it's the one that got away, dude. I played Game Boy Pocket, so I feel like I didn't need to have an original Game Boy. I did play the original Game Boy through proxy, through friends and stuff, but I never had a Game Boy Color. And so if one goes on the cheap, who knows? Maybe I'll have to grab one.
You know what? Honestly, I wouldn't worry about it because really, like just get on your phone. You can get some really good like mods that way.
Yeah, we're not going to get into emulation because I already own them on my phone, but there's something about the tactile feel of the directional pad and everything. But having an Xbox controller synced up to your phone and playing all the Game Boy games you ever want is also pretty damn dope. I'll give you that.
Yeah. All right, so like, okay, are we just gonna keep going? Because
yeah,
I want to talk about all the attachments.
Okay,
so,
that's gonna be at the end. You gotta be patient, homie.
I'm patient. I'm not.
Luckily,
patient.
there's not a ton more, but there's some cool, like, little interesting things about Game Boy, and it also kind of tells about the time that it came out. So first off, the Game Boy was one of the very, very first systems or game items where it was actually really well done when it was targeted towards female players. In 1995, Nintendo claimed that over 46% of Game Boy users were female, and it was a huge leap compared to Nintendo. Now, granted, Nintendo, the NES system, came out much earlier and it didn't have the same kind of approach, and they feel like a lot of this was kind of also because it was 1995. It was popular for you to kind of get a system for your kids, plural, and it's cheaper to get a couple Game Boys than just an NES. But it's become, that was when they started actually focusing on, rather than games are for boys and do something else for girls, that they went, hey, games are for the family. We need to make sure we target everyone, boys and girls, moving forward. This was the first time, because I mean, I think it was 29% is what it says for the NES system were female users, but the Game Boy was 46%. That's a huge jump.
Yeah, exactly. And it, you know, I remember back in the day, like, a girl playing a Game Boy was freaking awesome. That was amazing.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So a real quick one, just like every other Nintendo console, pretty much all the way up until the GameCube, I believe, Codemasters was able to actually make a Game Boy Genie, a Game Genie for Game Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh,
it's
man.
it's one of those things where you kind of wonder, but no, absolutely. Just like Sega, just like Nintendo and Super Nintendo and all those, Game Genie got their hands on that too.
Yep. And I remember that thing was like a beast. Like, it was like huge, like, because as all the Game Genies was, like, you'd plug the game into the Game Genie, and then you'd shove the whole Game Genie with the game slotted into it into the system.
Yep.
And the Game Boy Game Genie was huge. It was giant. It was like
It was
half the freaking thing.
ridiculous.
It was.
Yeah.
Kind of like they had to have like a cutout on the top where it was like where you could get to the power button.
Yeah.
It was that big.
Okay, Josh, you get your first peripheral now. You get your first little accessory, okay?
All
and
right.
that is the Game Boy Print and Play, which was a ridiculous accessory that I never knew I wanted until I saw it as a kid.
Oh yeah, and you were like, this is the stupidest thing and I want one.
Yes, exactly. They made it so you could take pictures with your Game Boy. It had a camera that you would plug into the cartridge section, and then using the sync cable, you were able to actually print it off on thermal paper, and you could add little little graphics over your picture, so you could have your dog could have wings and all sorts of shit. And some people say that this was like the indoctrination early on of selfies, the original selfie user kind of thing.
And if they actually had looked at any of the pictures that were taken, those selfies looked like a bunch of blobs. Like, didn't matter who it was.
Yeah, speaking of a bunch of blobs, actually, with the Print and Play, later on, it turns out that Neil Young, an album that he did called Silver and Gold, was actually, the cover of it is this pixelated picture of him, and it was taken by his daughter with her Game Boy Print and Play. And so if you ever look at Neil Young's album for Silver and Gold, it's a blob with a bunch of dots, but apparently it's him, and it's an image from the Game Boy Plug and Play. Interesting.
And like when he says like little bits of paper printing them out on it, it was like receipt paper.
Yep.
Pretty much.
It was thermal paper, and it was not good.
No, it wasn't, and it smeared. Yeah, not fun.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get to, you mentioned it earlier, the Super Game Boy.
So real quick, like I wanted to talk about a couple like of the like peripherals for the Game Boy that everyone had, like that are not like actually decent, like not the whole Print and Play and all, like the actual. I'm talking like the little lights that you had to plug into the side.
Yeah, that would drain your battery even faster.
Oh yeah, I remember still to this day. I got this little tiny light, and it was one little single LED, and it was in a blue casing, so it shined blue on the entire screen, and it was the best one I had ever found. Because like they had the original Game Boy like light shroud and stuff, and
that like covered and magnified the screen a little bit.
Yeah, and I never liked them. Like, it just never worked for me. I always had a hard time seeing the screen, especially like in the dark. It was ridiculous. But this little tiny single LED wire that came up and had a little hood that just shined on the thing. Holy crap, that thing like sharpened this picture, like everything. I was excited about that. And then you have like the bigger speakers. You have the giant, massive, like huge thing that changed the shape of the Game Boy to hold easier. Like all those old crappy like little peripherals. I think there was a lot, like everyone had their own opinions that they had to have certain things. And you know, you always had that kid that he pulled out his Game Boy and it was like a freaking giant like brick, because he had to fold out the speakers and fold down the screen, and then he had like a joystick on it and everything, and you're like, what the hell? That's not a Game Boy at that point. Yeah. Anyways,
I mean, it was funny because it was like aftermarket companies found a solution to a problem that Nintendo was like, we'll get it on the next round, and they just kind of like ignored it.
Well, and they gave like, because I mean the big like fold out speakers and everything, that was Nintendo. They did come out with it, but it was kind of just like a, yeah, here's a peripheral. Like, you don't need it. No one needs this. Like, but you can get it if you want light and better sound and stuff.
Yeah.
But like definitely the aftermarket was so much better, and it was just ridiculous how much, because this was the first time any of us had ever seen this kind of stuff, is these aftermarket peripherals that for the system. Like, I mean, the Nintendo didn't have a lot of aftermarket stuff. It was all just Nintendo, really. And none of the other systems at the time. But then the Game Boy came out, and it was like aftermarket, weird, different plugins for this and that. And
yeah,
it really worked.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that it's because there was more things you could make for the Game Boy than the Nintendo. Like, you could make travel cases. I had a few of those weird knockoff travel cases for my Game Boy Pocket. You could make extended battery packs. You could make all these different things that were, oh, this will help your original console. And I think that was an area that you couldn't really tap into on the original consoles as much, but on the handheld, it kind of made sense. Like, that light was a game changer for most people. You needed that, you know, for those late night gaming sessions when it's bedtime.
Yeah, exactly. And like when you're hiding under the covers, making, you know, pretending that you're asleep. It was like, it was important to a lot of people, but it was also like, it was just not really served in other ways by the actual creator. And so I loved a lot of that stuff, and it was always interesting to see which one, because like the little LED one, and I remember that to this day. I love that thing so much because it didn't drain the battery too much. Because most of them like were an entire setup where you had to plug in, and it had its own battery pack and everything.
Yep.
Which it was like, okay, I'm gonna go through 4 AA batteries plus 2 in this thing. Like, that was expensive. But this little LED, like, one of my friends had it, and I was like, whoa. And he's like, yeah, check this out, and it really works. And I was like so excited. He had a green cast one, and I was like, okay, it makes it look like a prettier green, not like the ugly swamp green that's on the screen normally.
Right.
But then it's like, I found there was a purple one and a blue one, and I was like, I want blue because blue is cool, and it made the screen just prettier, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. Just crazy shit.
Yeah. So
all right,
this
the
one
actual good stuff.
Yeah, like I had a really cool instance with this, and that was a Super Game Boy, and it was literally just a Super Nintendo cartridge you could throw a Game Boy cartridge into, but it made it so then you could have color, just like with the Game Boy Color. You could have color on your Game Boy games, and it was something that it was sold for a pretty penny, but actually I got it in a trade. I got it in a trade. I had gotten a Super Nintendo from my buddy Nick. And then I got a Super Game Boy, and I'm like, I don't even know what I'd do with this. But then I found my old Game Boy games, and dude, it kind of breathed life into the Game Boy games when you could play it on a big screen. And so it was a cool thing to add to the Game Boy. And it's something that I think that it was still so popular. That came out in 94, and I probably got it at the late 90s. But I mean, they created another Game Boy player, which was obviously for Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Color, but they did it for the GameCube.
Seriously, like, it was crazy. Like, it was one of those things, like, it took these games that you had struggled to play, like we said, like, a lot of us geeks, we'd play for hours, and by the end of it, you're just like, ow, my shoulders, ow, my eyes. Like, I remember I was into one of the games, and my eyes just hurt, and I looked in the mirror, and they were bright red, and I was like, oh no, I broke something. I literally went to my mom, and they said, I hurt my eyes. I don't know how this happened. Like, what's wrong with me? And she's like, well, what have you been doing? And I was like, I've just been playing my Game Boy. I've just been sitting around. And she's like, you strained your eyes. And I was like, are they going to be okay? Like, I was worried.
Man, she should have fucked with you and been like, no, you're totally screwed.
Like, you're going to go blind now.
Yeah.
Like, my mom is too nice for that. But
yeah, she's a gem.
but it's one of those things, like, being able to play these games that you wanted to play for hours on end on a TV,
Yeah.
That was game changing. That was amazing to me.
It was a big one, man. I mean, it really was. And it did get you to want to play them again, because you kind of wanted to see what they look like in color. You kind of wanted to see how they look blown up, which was most of the time not good. But still, you wanted to find that out for yourself.
Well, and also, like, they had the whole system where you could change the coloring of it. And honestly, I realized I just liked the black and white. Even for a lot of the Game Boy Color games, it was just nice to have it, like, solid color, like, simple to look at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So with that, we kind of just have some fun facts and that stuff that were kind of cool to wrap it up. First off, they have, like, for example, a Soviet cosmonaut actually took his Game Boy into space, and then he later auctioned it off, and he had said that it orbited the Earth 3,000 times. Another cool thing is that the Game Boy, one of the Game Boys survived the Gulf War after it had been in a barracks bombing, and it's actually that it's if you see an image of it, it's completely charred, completely destroyed, and it's just like this. It's an original gray Game Boy with a nasty green, LCD screen, but the LCD screen still looks okay, and it turns on, and it's technically playable-ish, but it still turns on, so it survived. That's what they're saying.
The screen was almost perfect on this, even with, like, the plastic, like the whatever screen, like, on top of the actual LCD, because it had to have the, I don't remember what it's called, but it was like curling up from the heat, and it still played just fine. It was crazy to look at. Yeah.
So just to skip around, the Game Boy and Game Boy Color sold more than the Atari Lynx and Sega Genesis combined, with 118 million units, right? And it actually stayed going strong, and they made the Game Boy Color line all the way from the beginning in 1989, and they finally discontinued it in the year 2000.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah. It overlaps when the Game Boy Advance was released, and I remember that because I had a Game Boy Advance before the PlayStation 2 came out, and that was 99.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Man, we're old, man. We're super old. Okay, so now at the bottom, I just had three more crazy, ridiculous accessories. And Josh already mentioned one, which was this super, made your Game Boy look like a spaceship. And the reason why is because it was, I can't remember what it was called. It's called like the Handy Boy is what it was.
And it was kind of questionable. Handy Boy, it was ridiculous.
It's questionable by today's terms.
Well, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But this thing was giant. Like, it added so much, and it had its own battery pack that you had to use.
Yeah.
But just look up maybe not look up Handy Boy.
Nintendo Handy Boy, you'll be safe. But pretty much, it makes it look like a spaceship, because you have these stereo speakers that wing out. You have this magnifying glass that made your screen not much bigger, but slightly, and it had a backlight, and also it made it so then your directional pad turned into a joystick. And then also your buttons turned into rocker buttons. It was crazy and excessive, and it's the peak of 90s aesthetic. It's hideous. Oh my god.
It is. It's terrible. It's ugly. And when my buddy got one, and I was like, "Oh, that is really cool." I tried playing with it, and I was like, "This thing is a brick. It's heavy." I wasn't a lightweight at that time, but still, it was heavy. And I was like, why would you do this? I mean, because that thing added at least double the weight. Yeah.
And on top of that, it completely defeated the purpose of being able to travel with it, because nothing was like super secure. Like the screen overhead thing would move around, the speakers would move around. So it's like, oh, cool. You made your portable device this ungodly fucking transformer, and it's not going to look any better.
No. And it really didn't help.
Yeah. So
the next one I never even knew about.
Oh my gosh, go for it, man. Go ahead and read it out.
This Game Boy accessory is only 90 kids remember, for a mere $600, which is $843 with inflation since 2000. You could own an Isaac Game Boy cartridge and cable included. This would let you automatically stitch any pre-made Nintendo graphic onto a piece of clothing you owned.
Yeah, specifically.
What the shit?
Specifically, the Isaac it's a sewing machine. You pay $600 to get a sewing machine. And it would made it so then, say you're on like the world map of Nintendo, or not Nintendo, of Mario, and you want to put that on a piece of fabric. Well, guess what? You have that on your screen, and you plug in your Game Boy to this weird ass matching, no less, sewing machine that's blue like the blue Game Boy color, and it would make it so then you could print off what you're seeing on your screen. You could stitch it onto a piece of fabric.
Like, this is like an embroidery machine.
Yep.
Back in the day. Holy shit. Like, I never even knew about that. This is actually pretty cool.
I mean, if you think about embroidery is just primarily stitching in a pattern, and a Game Boy screen is just a basic pattern. So, I mean, that's all that you were doing. And if you were trying to get the darker or lighter color tones, it pretty much was just increasing or decreasing the amount of embroidery in one section. So your pixelization and stuff, even across colors, kind of actually worked out pretty well on this machine. But it's one of those things, it doesn't make sense.
I want this now. I need to find myself a Game Boy again. I need to find this. Oh my gosh, this is the craziest thing ever.
Yeah.
I'm playing with some cross stitching stuff right now, and this is like automatic cross stitch. I want it.
This would have saved you a lot of time and, well, not money, but a lot of time at least.
Holy shit. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay. So if you have 800 bones floating around, just go get it, I guess, if that's what you want.
I'm a little bit overwhelmed on that one.
So the last one is, it's just weird because it's just a sign of the times more than anything else.
Oh, yeah.
And what it was is that if you wanted, you could, obviously, Nintendo's had a headphone jack for quiet gameplay, but a company called Newbie came out with stereo speakers that plugged into the headphone jack, and it added like 2 inches to the bottom of your Game Boy. And it was just this brick that, like Josh, like other ones, it required its own battery pack, and it just had an off and on switch, and it just made your Game Boy have louder speakers. But to really just icing on the cake, if you wanted to, what you could do is that you could pair it with a FM radio cartridge that goes in the cartridge section. You drop that in there, and it worked as an antenna for an FM radio system that you could put in there. So you get the radio, you get the dual speakers that are slightly better than your Game Boy speakers, and boom, you've got yourself a portable radio for your Game Boy.
A great way to suck out even more batteries from it.
Like, just most of these accessories, I look at them and I go, I wonder how much in batteries you didn't save by going the Game Boy route instead of like an NES, you know?
Really, like, how long would it have taken you to pay the same amount?
Right.
Like, wow, that's something to consider.
It makes you think. That's all. It just makes you think.
All right, this has gone on a little bit long. I mean, they usually do, because this is super fun going back over these things. But real quick, what was your favorite Game Boy game?
Dude, hands down, Pokemon Fire Red.
Not Pokemon. That's not fair. That's not fair. Non-Pokemon game.
If you want a non-Pokemon game, my favorite one was a Contra game. I think it was Contra, Super Contra. I think that's what it was. And it was a pain in the ass, to be honest. Like, it was a pain in the ass, but I loved it because it was the first game that I got on Game Boy that I felt like was as good as the actual, like, full size game. Even with the black and white, like, the gameplay felt good. And so it was Operation C. So it was the Contra the Alien Wars. That's what it was. Okay. Contra the Alien Wars. And that one, I played through it and I thought it was amazing. And then they actually redid it, I think, for Super Contra. I think that when it came out of Super Nintendo, it was the same game, just with updated graphics and everything. But I loved that one. I thought it was great.
Okay. Nice. I like that one. That one was really good. I like that one. So for me,
what about you, homie?
Mine, by far, Donkey Kong.
Donkey Kong.
Donkey Kong, like, they completely changed up the whole concept of it. And it wasn't like you were just trying to get up to Donkey Kong. It was like these entirely crazy levels, and they had extra things that you could, because you're trying to save Pauline like you do in Donkey Kong, but like every level had like her purse, her umbrella, and her hat that you could collect. And so
I remember that.
Dude, I spent so much time on this game because it was so great. Like, you could, like, there were some games, like some levels that you could just go through and easily just grab the key and get through the door. Like, done, easy. But then there were others that, like, if you wanted to do other stuff, oh, I love that game. I loved it. And then Donkey Kong 2, I never played Donkey Kong 3, so I don't know how that turned out, but man, I love that game. It was one of those games that I was like, why don't they just make this for Nintendo or Super Nintendo or anything else? Because I just wanted to play it all the time. That's where I got my neck hurt.
Nice. And that's why Josh has back problems now.
Yeah.
All right. So, dude, that was a good episode. It was fun. That's the end of our episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us. This was fun. And if there's like memories and stuff that you had about the Game Boy, because I think we all do, or at least of our age, let us know. We will be doing another retro roundup for the Advanced. It'll probably be a little bit shorter than this. And the DS will be another one later on.
The DS might be a robust one, I think.
Oh, yeah. I think it'll be a lot more robust. But, yeah. But those are not of this group. We just wanted to go with the Game Boy. So.
Yeah. We did it right. I think that it'll be good to break those up, because that would have been like an hour and a half, 2 hour long thing just getting the other ones.
Exactly. And now I have to go and find this freaking $800 Isaac Game Boy thing. Holy shit.
So if Josh makes a bitchin' shirt out of an embroidery machine, we'll make sure to post that and we'll go from there. Anyway,
or I'll die of embarrassment. So either way.
Yeah, we hope you guys liked it. All of our info is on the end stinger. If you have any questions, you can email us at geekreloading@gmail.com. And we hope you guys liked it, and we will talk to you next time.
Bye.
Geek Reloading Podcast with Adam and Josh. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Have a question? Email us at geekreloading@gmail.com. Theme song titled Rocket by Kevin MacLeod. You can rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your preferred podcast service.